Let's start with the tools you will need to complete this install. To make the installation of these rear sets as seamless as possible, go ahead and get your tools ready before you start the job. You'll need one set of needle nose pliers, a ratchet, a 16mm wrench, a 14mm wrench, a 12mm wrench, and a 10mm wrench. You'll also need a 12mm socket, a 19mm socket, as well as an 8mm Allen, a 6mm Allen. Finally, a long bolt that's about the same length and diameter as the swing arm axle. We also recommend applying Loctite to any of the hardware you install today. So now that you have all of your tools ready to go, let's start by heading to the exhaust side of the bike and removing the swing arm axle nut. The swing arm axle nut can be removed with a 19mm socket, but if you're using hand tools, you'll likely need to secure the other side with a 14mm wrench or socket to prevent the axle from spinning. After that, you'll need a 12mm socket to remove the lower rear set bolt, as well as the exhaust. When removing the exhaust, grab a 12mm wrench to secure the nut on the other side of the bolt. Now, our exhaust side rear set should be loose. Gently remove the rear set and flip it over to reveal the brake system. Use a 6mm Allen key to remove these two bolts holding on the rear brake master cylinder. In addition, there will typically be a retaining clip or a cotter pin securing the brake pedal on this shaft here. Once the master cylinder is loose and the foot brake pedal is free, you will be able to remove both springs. Finally, use your fingers or a set of pliers to remove the retaining clip for the wiring loom. With the exhaust side rear set now free, we can begin to remove the swing arm axle. However, if we simply remove the axle, it will be much more difficult to realign the swing arm and reinstall the axle. To remedy this, we are going to use a long bolt that is approximately the same length and diameter as our OEM swing arm axle. This will keep the swing arm aligned with the frame while still freeing the rear set on the other side. Line up your secondary bolt to the swing arm axle and firmly push it through to the other side. If the swing arm axle is stuck or difficult to remove, your swing arm axle could be bent or may just need a little lubrication. Once our support bolt has made it all the way through, we can head over to the other side of the bike. For this side, all we need to do is remove the lower 12mm bolt to free the rear set. Gently remove the rear set and flip it over to remove the retaining clip for the shift pedal. Typically, the OEM rear sets will have a retaining clip to secure the shifter. However, this one did not. Now, we are ready to install the new rear sets from Standupindustry. These rear sets can be configured in one of two ways. The first utilizes a U-shaped bracket that bolts in from the back side of the rear set and allows for the OEM folding foot pegs to be installed on the rear sets. The second, which is what we will be installing today, is a solid peg with an aggressive anti-slip texture. Both the U-shaped foot peg bracket as well as the solid pegs feature an extension that fits into the slot on the rear set to prevent the pegs from spinning loose. Let's start installing our new rear sets. The chain side rear set comes with a bolt and spacer to secure the shift pedal. Once the bolt is threaded into the rear set, tighten the bolt with an 8mm Allen. To achieve proper spacing, both rear sets come with a set of spacers that go in between the rear set and the mounting points on the frame. Each side gets one large and one small spacer. The longer spacers go to the exhaust side of the bike, while these shorter spacers here are for the chain side of the bike. Let's go ahead and install them now. Slide your large spacer onto the protruding support bolt followed by the rear set. Once in place, you can reverse the earlier step and push the swing arm axle back through. And don't forget to reinstall both washers on either side of the swing arm axle bolt. After that, align the smaller spacer between the frame and the lower hole on the rear set. You can reinstall the 12mm bolt. Once the rear set has been secured, you may need to adjust your shifter. If your shifter is too high or low, you can use a 10mm wrench to loosen the pinch bolt that secures the shift linkage to the shift shaft. Once loose, pull the shift linkage from the shaft. To adjust the position of the shift lever, simply rotate the shift linkage to the desired position and place it back onto the shaft, ensuring that you snugly reinstall the 10mm bolt. Failure to properly secure the linkage to the shift shaft could result in severe damage, so be sure to double check that the shift linkage is secured properly. Now let's head back over to the exhaust side of the bike. After installing the peg of our choice to the rear set, we now need to reattach the rear brake pedal. Remove the nut from the long bolt and spacer attached to the rear set. Now slide the rear brake pedal over the spacer and tighten the nut down with a 14mm wrench. Once the brake pedal is secure, Reinstall the large spring that goes from the brake pedal to the forward-facing hole on the back side of the rear set. Now gently slide the rear brake master onto the rear set, ensuring that both nuts are in place between the rear sets and the master. Secure the rear brake master with two 10mm nuts. You can now feed the brake light switch through the top-facing hole and reinstall the small spring by hand. Now we can slide our large spacer onto the protruding axle and gently slide the rear set into place. Be careful when reinstalling this rear set to ensure proper routing of the brake line. If there are any kinks in the brake line, remove the rear set and go back through each step to ensure the rear brake master is properly installed. Everything looks good here on ours, so now let's align the smaller spacer between the rear set and the lower rear set hole. Once everything is aligned, install the 12mm bolt and tighten the swing arm axle bolt. Don't forget to secure the other side of the axle with a 14mm socket or wrench to prevent the axle from spinning while you're tightening it. Finally, we can secure the exhaust onto the hanger. Both the nut and bolt are 14mm.